Hello. Hello from Hobart. Actually, we've already had 2 falls of snow on our magnificent mountain. I'm sure it's much nicer in Queensland. Lucky you. I just wanted to thank you for all your excellent posts online this week. Just don't forget that there's actually 2 topics. There's the research topic statement, but also your positionality statement. Joe's posted a great, concise, and clear positionality statement on her research. So if you're wondering about how to tackle that, just get online and have a look what she's posted there. Also, I know time's an issue for many of you, but if you can engage more with your peers, that's great. It actually makes the course more lively if we can get some good discussion happening. I wanted to thank Chiara for her excellent analogy of research, like fixing a plane while flying it. All research requires testing and readjusting constantly. So I thought that was a very nice phrase or way of putting it. Also, just on your keywords, I just want to have a little bit more discussion about that. They can be single words or phrases, usually of up to 2 to 4 words. Phrases are actually becoming more and more acceptable, so think a little bit more about that. They need to represent the topic and the methods, but they also need to have something about the field or subfields in which you're working. So they take a while to get that organised, but make sure you use your peers and even your supervisors to help you refine them as you work through the next year. They will change over the course of your research. But they are important because they're a good way of trying to capture the essence of your research. They also make your research more searchable online. And later, it actually helps your work get indexed so that others can find your work more easily. So they're a very important factor of getting your research out. And research is about communicating what you're doing. It's not just about sitting in a silo. So when you're deciding or working on your research, just think about on your keywords. Think about from the perspective of being the searcher. So if you were searching for your work online, what would you be putting in, or what would somebody be putting in to try and find your work? If they're too general or broad, you just draw in too much material and it'll just get lost within it. But on the other side of it, if they're too narrow, they may not actually find your work. So it's a tricky balance there. There is some material later in the unit, I think it's week 4 in the module, on the exegesis or equivalent, or whatever it is, the written component of your research. But I just wanted to say a few words about that today because it's often in your minds from early on. So the thesis can vary enormously. A thesis submitted with just the document of writing can be up to 80,000 words, although in the sciences sometimes it can be significantly less. In the creative arts, the exegesis component is usually around 30 to 40, but again that varies enormously across institutions, so it's important that you check and find out early on what those requirements are. It's also important to say that in a practice-based research, particularly in the creative arts, the actual exegesis and the practical component, whether that's a musical score, an exhibition, a performance or whatever, they together form the thesis. So one is not seen to be above the other, they're seen to be complementary. So, and again, some universities specify a weighting for that, for each component, but most just say it's 100% submission, including both those components. But again, that's something you probably need to find out. Just another note, in recent years for the creative arts, there's been a greater acceptance of the written component being a creative component in its own right. And if you're interested in exploring that, it's important that you run that past your supervisors. It can be, and it is, I think, the more difficult way to go because you still have to substantiate the research or account to the research standards. and indicate how the work contributes to new knowledge or expands existing knowledge. So even though there are a few examples around online that you can find, and if anyone's interested, I can point them in the direction of a couple that I know of. There's not many examples of people taking that option. So anyway, I encourage you to speak with supervisors about all those issues and get them sorted early on, because again, it'll affect the way that you develop your research and develop your methods. So you want to know what you're working towards from day one. I just wanted to say a few words about writing, Joe, for those of you not used to writing. It's important that you get into the habit of doing so. Here are some of my tips. I'll hold these up. So, can you see those? I just use strong words and check your word use. Words are often misused. And unravel jargon, that's a really big one for me. Reading realms of jargon really doesn't do much in terms of communicating the research. Be precise, be authentic. That's really important. Show something of yourself. That shows your reader that you really enjoyed and have committed to what you are doing. And create a shared reality. That is, take your reader with you. So they're my top tips. But I also wanted to give you some thoughts about how to approach your writing. So I recommend that every week you get into the habit, spending an hour or so just sitting down and writing a summary of what's happened that week. And that can be in your practical work, it can be in your experimentation, it can be even things that you've written, things that you've read. Make your full citations of any books, journals or articles that you read and get those citations into EndNote. Write down what you need to follow up on, any contacts you need to make. There's also any technologies or programs that you need to either learn or to access. And it's also a good idea to start each week writing down a few things that you can talk to your supervisor about. That'll make your supervisory meetings a lot more fluid. Then every month I suggest that you write up fully annotated bibliographies, and we'll talk more about that this week. But if you keep those going as you are doing your reading, it'll be a really useful resource for when you're actually writing up your context chapter. But we will talk more about that next week. But it's probably a good habit to get into every month, just sitting down and writing that. They can be from half a page to a page, and it'll really help you in the long run. And then every 2 to 4 months, I suggest that you write a working abstract. And this is why. I'll just see if you can see that. A working abstract forces you to clearly state your aims and justify them, show how your methodology fits the aims, highlight the major findings to date, determine the scope and significance of what you've done. And if any stage of the research you experience trouble writing an abstract, this exercise usually helps you to show you where the weaker components of the research is. So really that's all I have today. If you've got any questions, just jump online and email me. Please keep up the online work. That's really important. Next week I'll actually be in Launceston running a series of art labs, but I'll try and get to your questions during the evenings so that we can keep that discussion happening. And I think that's all for now. So bye. I'll see you next week.